Smoking on young, what's the name? Tonight. Smoking on young, so his name? Tonight. I have talked about. I also haven't watched this video, and I won't be able to on the stream, honestly. So maybe it's talking shit on me, maybe it's not. I'll respond to it later, let's say. But another pretty, like, a medium-sized channel covered the Kyle Kulinski drama that I talked about. So let's see. This was on the Vanguard, so I'll talk about it later. But basically, a lot of places are now seeing this, and it's getting coverage. And that's exactly what I wanted to happen, so that's great. But yeah, I've been talking about how Kyle Kulinski, someone who I've gotten along with, someone who I find to be a friend, potential ally on the left, has, in my opinion, lost his integrity because he repeatedly gives the benefit of the doubt to bad faith actors with massive platforms, bending over backwards to say that they are actually on the left, that they actually stand for leftist values, they actually can be trusted, only to get burned every single time. He did this for Jimmy Dore. He did this for Joe Rogan. I think Joe Rogan was the biggest fumble and the one he stuck his neck out for the most because he has made video after video after video saying, hey, I think Joe Rogan is reasonable on this, but I disagree with him on this. And guess what? He ended up watching that video and I was able to change his mind. So Joe Rogan's actually a reasonable person. Look at all the leftists he brings on. So don't worry about it. It's okay. When in reality, all the people who, the majority of the people that Rogan brings on, the majority of the people who he exposes his audience of millions to kind of touch on the significance of this, the majority of the people he's essentially brainwashing, Joe Rogan is, are people from the right that he does not really challenge. He eats their propaganda and their way of life, and then he turns it into spin that, you know, like average Joes can eat up, and then that turns into violence against trans people. That turns into bigotry and ignorance against black people and Latinos and Asian Americans and just people of marginalized groups who just don't usually get a voice. Muslims. People with disabilities. All these different groups. And it's not just about like making jokes on a show. It's fine. Like you have a podcast and keep it irreverent. That happens. But these are 3-hour conversations with very little vetting or journalistic integrity that Joe Rogan is doing, that Kyle Kulinski is defending. Just because every once in a while a Bernie Sanders, a Cornel West, Kyle Kulinski pops in. That's what I ultimately think this is about. This is about access journalism and access politics, except it's not that it's Kyle Kulinski back in the day when he would stand up against power and complain about people on MSNBC and CNN speaking nicely about the Democratic Party just so they could get access to the Obama administration and access to all the parties and the scoops and all the information. The same criticism that he gives to places like the New York Times and the Washington Post today. Rightfully so. But there is access journalism and independent media as well. There are streams of independent media now. Now this is a semi-mature space. We've had really independent media flourishing since, I'd say, blogging in the 2000s and the dawn of YouTube in 2006 to other platforms, MySpace, Facebook, Twitter, Vine to some extent, now Twitch, YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, Doritos, Cheetos, Fritos, no. These are all, we're now at a mature stage in independent media. And so just as in regular media, you had power players and actors in that sense, you have those also very much in existence for independent media. And so when it comes down to Kyle, I believe that Kyle Kulinski ultimately wants access to Joe Rogan, maybe in some misguided way, because he believes that he will be able to push him further left on some issues. But to that point, I say, bro, get to stepping. Bro, get to working, because I don't see it. When Joe Rogan repeatedly goes on his show and harps away on the trans people and women's sports thing, like, that has downstream effects to the right wing and how they're using that to terrorize trans people and make a bunch of laws that target trans people's rights and target LGBTQ rights in general and paint queer people as child groomers right before an election just to scare suburban white families, to motivate them into scare politics for voting. Because all conservatives have are scare politics. That's the game that Joe Rogan always peddles in. It's in pandemic denialism and conspiracies. I'm the first to say the CDC didn't get anything right, and I plan on doing a larger Power Report segment on how a lot of the media, even on the left, is really messing up the COVID-19 situation. And it starts at the CDC. And so those are things we might even agree with Joe Rogan with, actually. And in a weird way. I think we take it in much different ways. But the effect that his speech towards communities of color is felt, the way that's felt towards communities with disabilities, the real life impacts it's had because of people listening to Joe Rogan's show and having vaccine denialism. They're making the world less safe for people who are immunocompromised. They are making the world less safe for people who are queer because they're feeding into the mistrust in alternative media. Joe Rogan has a place to say, hey, listen, I'm a masculine man who smokes weed and doesn't mind gay people and believes in universal basic income, as Kyle Kulinski loves to tout, right? However, it's, if you net out what Joe Rogan, like the people Joe Rogan has had on, the Tim Pools, like that famous Tim Pool Twitter thing, right? If you net out all of the propaganda that Joe Rogan has wittingly or unwittingly done for the right wing, and what he's done to expose left-wingers to that admittedly right-leaning audience, then it's no contest. Joe Rogan has helped the right more. And Kyle, you should be interested in having the left be helped more. Joe Rogan's platform is about reaching new spaces. Spaces that are outside the political realm. And that's what I try to do with a lot of my content as well. Because, I mean, Power Report's probably the least example of that because it is a political show in the format of a, repeatedly done project. You know, some are daily, some are weekly, some are every couple of weeks, some are monthly. It's in that format of covering news. So, Power Report on the one hand, it's hard to do that. But I just did a segment, a whole hour on weed, and a whole other hour on world news. I get to focus on these other different things and have a fun spin on them and then bring them in a new light on my show and bring them to new audiences. I can have guests who aren't white people, who aren't able-bodied people, who aren't Judeo-Christian folks, like, who don't fit the standard mold. Like, I can have people from different communities, different religions, different creeds on my show. And a healthy amount of white people and a healthy amount of Judeo-Christian folks who come on the show as well. Because I can do the show a little bit differently. I can do these shows a little bit better. I can do these shows a little bit smarter because I'm diversifying my audience. I'm listening to a wider number of perspectives. Kyle is closing himself off. What I'm saying are things members of his audience have noticed. What I'm saying is literally nothing new under the sun. So, yeah, I posted this thread. I don't have to go through the whole thing. I'm sure people can find it on Twitter. But it's everything I've been saying since February about how he has been up Joe Rogan's ass when there was the Planet of the Apes controversy. He will point to all these moments where Joe Rogan said good things about different people or different leftist candidates or different people of color or whatever, right? Okay, and so, like, I counter that by going, you can't just point to a couple of good things with a couple of bad things. By the way, Jimmy Dore, Bernie Sanders, Tulsi Gabbard, I wouldn't exactly assume these are, or put these as leftists, but whatever. I point out how Joe Rogan had an opportunity, how Kyle Kulinski had the opportunity to point out the rail strike to Joe Rogan goddamn in February. We're now learning about the rail strike, again, the freight workers strikes that happened last week that threatened to shut down the economy. Rogan was reporting that, oh wow, look at all of the shit that's being stolen from these trains. Crime is out of control in LA. Good thing I left there. When in reality, Union Pacific and a lot of these freight companies were laying off workers left and right. So of course, it would have been harder to retain the level of security they're used to and the level of security that they used to have. So Joe Rogan was essentially making an anti-worker point over here by equating, but by not telling the full story, by not having the full story, by using his platform, by misusing his platform, sorry, let me get my words together, by misusing his platform and spreading the misinformation that was largely, here we go, by spreading the misinformation that was largely debunked elsewhere in the media, but was spread by right-wingers consistently, Kyle Kulinski missed a phenomenal opportunity, along with Crystal Ball, who said that there's no one more reasonable than Joe Rogan to convince on political issues in media space. You need to be held accountable for, okay, using your ability, your platform, to hold Joe Rogan accountable, to show Joe Rogan the error of his ways. But again, didn't. He would brag about his ability to reason with Joe Rogan and peddle COVID misinformation. But eventually, and again, he repeatedly released these videos saying, oh, Joe Rogan's this reasonable guy, even though this video's going around where the left is haranguing him. The left needs to understand he's actually an ally, and we can actually be convinced and be put on his side. And then Kyle Kulinski realizes that Joe Rogan has endorsed Ron DeSantis. Whether it's for governor or for president, I forget off the top of... Oh yeah, for 2024, yes, it's Ron DeSantis for president, at least like right now at this point. And Kyle has a much harder time. It's a tougher pill to swallow for him, and he keeps trying to play videos of, okay, he's kind of a leftist, he's kind of smart here, but he has a harder time and ultimately comes to the conclusion that Joe Rogan is an right-winger. and that he may not be as redeemable as Kyle has spent the past, what is it, several years now, cashing in on the integrity he has spent railing against access journalism. Now playing into the hands of access journalism because he's buddy-buddy with Joe Rogan. Yo, I get it. If you have the ability to text Joe Rogan, he responds back and listens to what you have to say and pays attention to that, and then maybe repeats that on his audience to his audience and changes his word, that's powerful. Use that power. The whole reason I started the show was to kind of emphasize, or like the reason we called it Power Report, was to emphasize who has power, who uses it, who wants it, and who needs it. The people who need it right now are marginalized people, the working class, people of color, trans folks especially. Joe Rogan has a lot of answering to do on. And who wants these power, these Republican ghouls who want to take rights away from all these groups, women especially. And who's using the power, yeah, again, a lot of these Republican ghouls. And because they have it. McConnell in the situation, you have the power, and you have the influence. You have the power to influence Joe Rogan, and you have the power to influence the people who are on your side watching you. And you're wasting it, you're blowing it on defending Joe Rogan for not listening to you. Sure, he is finally coming around, far too late. And not really taking any accountability for it. Sure, like I got some ridiculous responses from this. And that's kind of like what I'm trying to get this to. One person said here, let me get this on the screen. I don't really watch Kyle enough to form a valuable opinion, but have you considered that he's an insecure idiot who wants the cool kids to like him? I'm reminded of Kyle trying to play nice with Jimmy Dore and Dore throwing him in a wood chipper, I assume is what he means. And yes, that is exactly what I noticed. That's exactly what I saw. Exactly what I was trying to point out to Kyle. Exactly what Kyle fell for. And he got really hurt from it. Going to some more responses here. Because I'm not just going to respond to, or not just going to respond to the good ones, the bad ones. But like, here's one. Thank you for this. I was a member of Secular Talk for 9 years, but canceled 2 years ago for these reasons. I've unfollowed him and don't watch him at all. Makes me a little sad. I enjoyed Corbin and Kyle, his podcast that he does. But at this point, good riddance. And yeah, it's sad. He's losing his own audience. And we did a video. Shout out Caesar, who's going to be on a future Power Report episode. Especially as we do the election special. Like, I did the video with Caesar. Basically, that's the train of thought I was trying to get at. Where we pointed out that Kyle's own audience was turning against him. They were in his videos going, oh wow, here's another instance of Kyle giving Joe Rogan the old-fashioned. Kaho Zhang sends in, now we get into the critical ones. I think you should go to Crystal, Kyle, and friends to clear up any misunderstanding there. Through a direct dialogue, hopefully you both can reach a mutual understanding and not have your friendship torn apart because of misunderstandings. I hope so too. I am willing to break my live stream debates are pointless rule to talk this out with... This is my beef largely with Kyle. I think Crystal has a lot of these same faults, but this is my beef largely with Kyle. But I'm 100% sure they're afraid to speak to me on this. They would rather promote right-wingers on their show than be challenged from the left on the show. It's a true fact. It's being proven out. I mean, there are DMs here. I'm not going to show them. But Kyle has seen a lot of this. and he's deliberately not responding. Now, other content creators are making these videos and they're deliberately not responding. And there is one point I want to get to before I really dig into other comments here, is addendums, right? Because one common complaint here is that I'm trying to cancel Kyle. Or that I'm trying to get people to stop watching him. And I am being bold and I am being bombastic when I'm saying that Kyle Kulinski has lost his integrity. I think I back it up with months of research and evidence. But to respond to some common complaints, one, as I've said, as I've been on record before and will continue to say, cancel culture doesn't exist. Cancel culture doesn't exist. Cancel culture doesn't exist. Cancel culture doesn't exist. Number two, there's literally a Twitter account with fucking like 40,000 followers. Yeah, old Kyle Kulinski tweets. This Twitter account, old Kyle Kulinski tweets, just posts literally the worst things that Kyle Kulinski has ever said, right? Like, it's rude to go into some of these things, but you know, there's Kyle Kulinski doing like fake Tiger Woods tweets. There's, you know, funny ones here. There's, you know, like if you type "you" into my computer, tube is not the first suggestion. These ads that try to get people to stop saying gay in a derogatory way or are gay. And this is from 2012 here. And this is why I'm like, listen, I think there should be, like, going into old tweets, right? Like, it's a little bit of a dicey territory. I believe people can learn and move forward from their actions. Again, I'm not trying to cancel anyone here. This is about integrity. This is about what you're doing with your audience. Do you really care about access journalism, or is this all a facade to you? Kyle Kulinski tweeting, "Help a nigga out." Yeah, man. Like, I don't know. There are things on this account that are tweeted all the time that could feasibly cancel Kyle Kulinski here. And if I were really petty, I could like try to direct more attention to these, more so than I even did in this tweet right here. But like I said, I'm not going to. But my point here is that why are the concerns of marginalized groups constantly put on the back burner by white leftists, both on and offline, while I have your attention? Because that is ultimately what this gets down to. Is marginalized leftists are warning you, telling you about this issue when it comes to Rogan, right? And these are people who are warning you with bigger followings than I. I'm not afraid to show it. I one retweet and 4 likes on this like tweet right here. It's not the most amazing thing. Like these are pretty okay like numbers for me, right? But like I don't have as much influence as a lot of other leftists who are talking about these things on a day-to-day basis, right? And a lot of folks have pointed out Kyle Kulinski's proclivity to be a little bit behind the board on a lot of these things, like behind the wagon, being naive with the Jimmy Dore situation, for example, right? And that is what I'm trying to get at. That's what I'm trying to suss out. Is Kyle trying to let the audience drive what he's doing? I hope not. But that's what we're thinking of. Also, hi Cosmopolitics' audience and the people watching. Really appreciate you. And we should do a collab sometime. I really appreciate. I like watch you from afar on social media and on video spaces. I really like what you're But in really getting into this stuff about the Kyle Kulinski thing I'm talking about, where I'm trying to point out how he isn't paying a lot of attention to leftist spaces and things like this. Hello, Grimpy Coffee. Really, really appreciate you being here. I am happy that people are finally paying attention to this, because outside of the internet, outside of this like organizing, outside of this internet space right here, on actual organizing spaces where actual political work gets done, mind you, this issue arises again, where white leftists are trying very hard to speak up and speak out on behalf of marginalized communities, but in turn they speak over marginalized communities. They don't do enough supporting, they do a lot of suppressing. And a lot of times they give the benefit of the doubt to people in terms of like, hey, this is how we expand our base, this is how we build solidarity. No. Just like with the Democrats. Again, Kyle Kulinski saying he's someone who fights outside the Democratic Party. Just like with the Democrats, and how we tell them that you don't need to chase the white working class to get voters. You need to engage the multicultural working class and motivate them to vote for you, to give them reasons to vote for you. You need to motivate young people to give them reasons to vote for you by passing policy that's popular, points that Kyle Kulinski absolutely agrees with me on, in order to expand your voter base. Okay? So, on the left, in reality, they will constantly defend people who, like in these organizing spaces, they'll defend, and especially in Kyle's case specifically, they will defend right-wingers and people like Joe Rogan, because they're like, listen, if we appeal to Joe Rogan's audience and appeal to some of their sensibilities, then we will definitely be able to if we appeal to their sensibilities and appeal to their right-wing like bigotry, then we'll be able to we'll be able to win their votes, right? And that's just not the case. Because if you try to appeal to their votes, when a lot of them are just being scaremongered, and I'm not saying completely disregard the white Trump voter, so to speak, the formerly Obama then flipped to Trump voter, but I'm saying, where are your efforts towards working class black voters, Latino voters, Asian voters, disabled voters, LGBTQ plus voters? Where are you fighting for them? Where are you motivating them to get involved in the political process? That is where things are important. And that's where Kyle is failing. That's where the left is failing. So not only is this a warpath on Kyle Kulinski, this is a larger lesson on inside of DSA, where there are arguments between like Afro-socialists and DSA caucus as a whole as to representation and actually listening to what that part of the group has to say. They're having such a struggle being heard in those contexts that this indicates a larger problem within leftist culture, and something that I think a lot of pundits don't want to admit publicly is that the people who watch us imitate our behaviors. They imitate the way we speak. They imitate our tics and our tone. Much like, you know, Trump and his rhetoric set a tone. The United States, they raise the temperature. We on the left do. And so when you have people who speak from places of authority, which comes with numbers and audience, but also like actual political power, and you speak with confidence, people will naturally be drawn to that. It's a power I know I'm wielding at this very moment. And so I treat that with responsibility. I open myself to accountability to make sure I'm always using that in the right way. Kyle is literally not doing that. He is doing the direct opposite. He is avoiding all of that responsibility. And I believe there should be points about that. We should call that out, you know? And so, again, I don't want cancellation. I want dialogue. I'll read some chats here, especially from Twitch, since we had some folks in the raid. A couple first-time chatters. Grumpy Coffee has like the Tomb Raid. Thank you very much. Misty Blue 702 says, way too much talking, never any action. I agree. We need actual action, especially when one of my original tweets here, hopefully I get to it, but it's like, trans rights are under assault in America, and Kyle Kulinski just wants to defend Joe Rogan, who is one of the major perpetrators of these things. It's in previous Power Report videos. Check them out on my YouTube channel if you haven't seen them already. On YouTube, check out the YouTube chat really fast. Jordan Ryan saying she... I'll start with Duncan Turley, actually. Says, I've always thought Kyle was obnoxious to listen to. Both him and Crystal mess up by being friends with and enabling Sagar. Yeah, I'm not the only one, and you're not the only one, but thank you for pointing that out, Duncan Turley. I appreciate you, because I wouldn't have probably mentioned it otherwise if you hadn't pointed out just now. But Lance from the Surfs Majority Report has pointed out a number of times where Crystal Ball sort of yes-ands or chooses not to go against Sagar on some of his more nationalist policies. And again, like, the idea of breaking points, the idea of Hill Rising, the format they're trying to create there was finding common ground between the two shadow parties in American politics. Because everyone, if I were to give a Civics 101 class, people say that there are two parties, like one on the left. There's like this Democratic Party and the Republican Party. I would say in reality, there's more like four parties. There's the Democratic Party, the Republican Party, and there's the further left and the further right. I say further because I want to like big tent them a little bit here, but like there are moderates, which are the main Democrats and Republicans in the center. Maybe that's all like a uni-party in one. Maybe it's three parties. There's the moderates, the further left, and the farther right. I would even subscribe to that theory. But that's a better valence for viewing politics, I would say. And even if you subscribe to that and trying to find common ground, as I guess Crystal and Saga are trying to do, you need to call that out. You need to debate that. And sometimes Crystal does, but, you know, in very crucial times, like on immigration, on climate. Just many of the dumber things Saga is talking about that are very crucial at this time. It's very often that Crystal will drop the ball. Jordan Ryan says, she has become increasingly reactionary. No, she has not the worst, but it's a clear trend. I think talking about Crystal Ball. That's why I wanted to read these comments in this order. Jordan Ryan also says, she also low-key is against supporting Ukraine. It's not very low-key. She constantly puts aid for Ukraine against the American people, save programs to benefit us, as if it's a zero-sum game. That's really interesting. That comment, honestly, it's challenging me a little bit. Because my first reaction is, in a way, it is a zero-sum game because you can't get funding for everything. Ukraine kind of gets a blank check, and you know, I very much empathize with the plight to the extent that I can, of course. I haven't experienced a 1 sec as I get my charger for my laptop. I have an experience, of course, like being in a war zone, like my main like life turning into a war zone. That's something I fundamentally can't experience, obviously. But like my main criticism of the Ukraine efforts is that we're just funneling a bunch of money there with no real plan of defeating Russia, so to speak, or no real plan of deterring Russia and like permanently leaving them out of Ukraine or having them cede territory, or at least in this special military operation, as the Russians are calling it, right? Which is, again, like obviously an invasion. The only plan is to just continually, along with the national, along with the international community, sans China and a couple others, just continue sending money there. So we need a better plan, honestly, in order to really make things happen there. But unfortunately, that can't happen. Also, shout out Don James 1676 who says, "Oh hey, I see you on Doc Ritchie's show once in a while. Hello, welcome. Love to see you here. Yes, I do Power Report every Thursday. I'm here streaming from 6 to 9. I'm gonna go a little bit later because I want to talk about a few more things today. So I'm gonna go a little bit after 6 to 9 Pacific, 9 p.m. Pacific, 12 a.m. Eastern. So if you stay on longer, I'll talk about the Twitch gambling drama a little bit, and maybe I'll even talk about the Dennis Prager Anna Kasparian debate. But yes, Don James says, "Hello, I love your takes, bro. Thank you very much. I really appreciate you. It really means a lot for you to be up watching and talking about this." I was just wrapping up some stuff on Kyle Kulinski and my relationship with him, how I want to push him and other people on the left who claim to be leftists to use their power a little bit better and be smarter about access journalism than their predecessors, or just be against it and be consistent with it entirely. Check me out on Twitter at Dan from the Web, just like my Twitch channel as well, and follow me if you aren't already. Really appreciate that if you can. And yeah, I'm trying to think of anything else I wanted to say there. Yeah, like, there's a couple of hate tweets. I love going through hate tweets. Those are fun. Let's see. Oh, God, there's one right here. Yo, Kyle never said he likes everything Joe Rogan said now, politically or in past, but he does have some agreements with him, and he has tried to help Rogan understand progressive values. This is why, till this day, Rogan would vote Bernie Sanders over all. Okay, cool. But in this day, Bernie Sanders is not realistically going to run for president, and Joe Rogan has been courted by a bunch of right-wingers, and so he is now turned into someone who I would have said maybe in 2018 or 2019. No. In 2016 or 2017, maybe 2015. Would have said that, yeah, Joe Rogan is someone who's largely left, has some right-leaning tendencies, but that helps him expand his audience in an okay way. But I think he's largely on the left and can be convinced of left-wing things. I think if you look in, reality in 2022, 2023 as we're about to enter, Joe Rogan is a totally different guy, totally different person. And we can see that differently, thankfully. But yeah. Don James says, Rogan also said he would vote for Tulsi Gabbard. And you're totally right there. 100% right. So let's see some other comments I can respond to really fast. I am Subraman says, this seems really petty and dishonest. I added the really there. Sorry. This seems petty and dishonest. This isn't about Kyle's takes. It's about Joe's takes and assigning that to Kyle not trying hard enough. JRE has multiple influences. Kyle tries to reach some agreements and has a blind spot, but you can't blame Kyle for every absurd thing Joe says. No, I blame Kyle for coming out after every time Joe Rogan says an absurd thing and defending him for it. If he doesn't defend the absurd thing outright, he says, okay, listen, maybe Joe Rogan said this absurd thing, but don't worry about it because it cancels out because he's said these other great things. And that's like that's a path. That's a path that goes nowhere. It's a bridge to nowhere, so to speak, right? Duncan Turley says, yeah, glad I found your channel. Really enjoying seeing your takes elsewhere. Really appreciate the compliments. It helps keep me going. But also, yeah, I did not want to do a political show. I didn't think I had the ego for it. What powers me is the anger of people who have these platforms and are misusing them. So I'll build a platform, I'll build an audience as big or bigger than theirs, or, you know, big enough to make a splash, and use it to develop power and use it to build power. Because unfortunately some of my colleagues are not. Yeah. So that's my response. I blame him for defending everything. And yeah, other people were like, sarcastically, what a productive use of time. And I like some of the responses here. Some people, you know, kind of standing up for me a little bit. One response that is not standing up for me says, I thought this was going to be a thread about Kyle's own bad takes, but it's all about Joe Rogan having bad takes and Kyle having a Rogan blind spot. You've never had someone it took you a while to accept was bad or had a personal bias towards you because they were nice towards you personally. And the other person says, when that person is #1 podcast in America. Again, Kyle Kulinski has railed against access journalism for his entire career. And said that just because you're nice to people doesn't mean you should treat them with kids' gloves. What is this? What is the integrity here? What is the integrity to what Kyle Kulinski has been preaching back when I was listening to secular talk, back before most of y'all motherfuckers cared about politics? And again, he's the #1 podcast, who's the #1 influence, like, literally. So, I'm done picking out at this. I will work on it later, but, people call this petty clout chasing. No, it's not. I'm aware that it's getting attention, and some people are choosing to follow me because I'm saying something that they've been feeling. Welcome to politics, all right? Like, that's how it works. But I have substance. I have a general feeling here. I'll concede that, you know, I'm doing a lot of things. Maybe I'm not explaining it in a way that is clearest to as most people, but that's why I'm going to keep hammering on it. I'm going to keep explaining it. I'm going to keep convincing more people. And hopefully this turns into a productive dialogue with Kyle, who is choosing to ignore all of this. And a lesson that can be learned for the left overall, that we can't move until we work with and consider and collaborate with and empower marginalized communities. That is my left. That is our left. That's what we have to do.